Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. You might notice I have a little glitter on me. Well, all I can say is that it was a Halloween costume, so happy Halloween everybody. I'm sorry if it's a little distracting, but glitter is really hard to get off. That's all I'm gonna say and leave it at that. Today I thought I would talk about my coming out story. That's something I've never actually recorded before, and I think it's something you pretty much have to do if you're an LGBT YouTuber. Yeah, I did know I was different, at least when I was pretty young, around 9 or 10 years old. I didn't have a word or vocabulary to describe that. That was part of the confusion for me. I didn't know how to tell other people, and to be honest, even if I'd done it back then, which was the early 80s, a lot of people wouldn't have understood, let alone my parents. But in any case, I did it much later in life, which was close to 40 years old. What happened was in May 2010, my father passed, which was, as you can imagine, something that weighed very heavily on me. And I had spent my entire life up to that point suppressing a lot of emotions. You know, when you carry this thing around with you, it's something you really have to work at to suppress. It's really difficult to live with, and it made me very depressed. It made me a very upset and kind of disgruntled individual the older I got. It wasn't a pretty sight. When my father passed, I found myself losing the ability to suppress those emotions really effectively. All these things kind of bubbled to the top. My father was kind of very sad at the very end of his life. He had a lot of regrets, but we had no idea what they were, and they really upset him. And as I worked through my emotions after his passing, I had this just overwhelming feeling that I didn't want to die with regrets either. So I started examining myself and where these feelings of otherness were coming from. I did something then which I didn't have the opportunity to do back in the 80s, which is I went on the internet and I went on a discussion board and I went to a cross-dresser forum. So why did I go to a cross-dresser forum? Well, I did have some clothes that I would wear from time to time back then that were not designed for men. I started reading these stories in the forum, and they were all things like how to make realistic looking breasts with different kinds of materials and how to find clothes that fit you and all kinds of other things. And I realized that I didn't want the facade of womanhood. I didn't want to just look like a woman. It occurred to me then that I think I kind of really wanted to be a woman. I drifted over to the transgender part of the same forum and I started reading those life stories. And I just had this idea back then that I wasn't transgender because my story didn't fit the stereotype of what I thought that was. You know, somebody who grew up playing with Barbie dolls and that kind of thing, and that was never me. So I started reading their stories and I suddenly realized that they were exactly like me. Everything. It was really, really frightening, as you can imagine, because I was living by this point, you know, in a beautiful, very conservative neighborhood, in a very large home with my wife and my son. And we'd been married 15 years, and I had no idea how I was going to get from suburban dad to this. So for a while, I just didn't talk about it. I suppressed it some more. One day I decided to go to Florida to go visit my mom. We got in our minivan and we started driving from Houston all the way to Orlando, Florida. And around Mobile, Alabama, there's a stretch of I-10, Interstate 10, that kind of goes over water, a large elevated area. And I suddenly had the strongest, and I mean really strong impulse to just drive off into the water, which really, really scared me because first of all, my son was in the car. So that meant I wasn't gonna do it. But the fact that I even had that compulsion scared me really badly. I got all the way to Orlando and I decided that this was something I needed to take care of. I couldn't just continue to ignore it. I tried to have a normal vacation with my son at Disney and places like that that brought me happiness, but behind my sunglasses, I was tearing up thinking about all the things that were gonna change in my life because it was really hard. I didn't know how things were going to end up. At some point I decided I just needed to tell my then wife. So we got in the car, drove all the way back home to Houston, and when I got out of the car, I had a little walk and talk with my wife, and I was so scared to tell her anything, as you can imagine. And it was only when we were walking back home that I finally had the courage to kind of haltingly say, I have these feelings and I don't know what they mean, but I just knew that I needed to deal with them. As you can imagine, there was a lot of tears and we didn't know what was going to happen. I went to see a therapist who shortly thereafter did confirm with me that yeah, you really are transgender. At that point then it became a question, how do we come out to people? First started coming out to really, really close friends, like a really close inner circle of friends. Later on then I wrote a letter. I wrote a really, really long letter telling everybody what was going to happen. And I do quite like my life now. I mean, I've gotten to meet amazing, incredible people that I never would have been able to otherwise. And that's not to say I didn't love my old life as well, because I really did. I love being married and I love being part of a family. And part of my heartache is the fact that I'm not a full-time parent to my son anymore. I'll be very honest about that. But in any case, I can't change the past, and all I can do is move forward with my future along with you guys. And I've gotten a chance to do some incredible things, like become a professional writer for a local LGBT magazine, a professional photographer at some amazing events around Orlando, and of course start this YouTube channel where I get to share my life with you guys. And I hope my story at least helps some of you, and to see that you're not alone. I hope you guys have enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and see you around the interwebs.